cultivating a digital knowledge garden. Now, the introduction that I want to start with is, isn't this just another personal knowledge management video? And you know what? To be honest, it is. It's the exact same thing. And I was inspired by this when I came across personal knowledge management and building a second brain in one of Ali Abdaal's videos earlier in the year. And he's done a really good job of synthesizing what it means to be building a second brain and manage your knowledge. But for me, my brain still thinks of that as like a little bit competitive and a little bit like trying to prove something for myself. So that's just the way that I work, and I've changed it in my own language to be a digital knowledge garden. It's just something that I go and tend to when I want to, and it's, there's some intention behind it. It's not something I'm doing with like an end goal. It's like I garden and I grow things for fun instead of like I manage my knowledge. So that's just the connotations behind that. And I think there's a lot of videos which are very clickbaity, how I remember everything. Whilst those videos are great and the content is really good, I really want it to be something that is holistic and will grow with me and be built upon time. So that's just why I've called it Cultivating a Digital Knowledge Garden, a little bit of an introduction. And if you are in the same boat, or if you feel like that might be something that resonates with you, then hopefully my approach will also have some value for you. So what do I want to achieve with this system? Quite a few things. So I want to find the Goldilocks zone between chaos and order. What does that mean? Well, I think there is this over-structured approach, and you can see it with this like top-down hierarchy and folders or whatever, but there's also just like complete chaos, like where it's just like everything is in there and there's absolutely no structure. So I'm wanting to find some sort of balance that allows me to bring the two together and still have the benefits of both worlds. The real thing for me is crystallizing my thinking. And, through writing, I believe that you can really improve your thinking. I've realized that oftentimes when you're just sort of quoting other people, whatever, you don't really understand what the crux of their argument is. So for me, the digital knowledge garden is all about writing things down so that I can really crystallize the thinking. The third thing is enabling to produce in a sustainable way. So if I want to go to the garden analogy, I want to produce, good herbs and outcomes along the way in my little garden. And it's not, it has to be a tree or whatever. It's just like a sustainable production of things that I can cultivate. In addition to that, I want to focus on original output rather than like regurgitation. For me, I always say quote this person and quote this person, but like there's this thing about like trying to appear smart by quoting other people and just like really internalizing things and making them your own. And I feel by writing them down and creating this garden, that's how I will get there. Another thing is like promoting organic discovery, like getting those natural links, making sure that one day I'll come back and be able to find the information again. And then another thing that I want to do is I want to do all of that whilst maintaining everything in one place. I don't want to have one database for one thing and another for work and whatever. So you can see there my work CRM, personal PKM, I'm using the PKM nomenclature there, journaling, writing. I want it all to be in one place. So those are the outcomes that I want to achieve. Now, before we get into the principles that I'm trying to apply, I want to talk about this concept of world after midnight. And this comes from a TED talk, which I'll link to in the description, by Teddy Obeng. Now, on the y-axis, I've got the rate of change, and then on the x-axis, I've got the progression over time. If we draw a graph of learning over on this axis, you can see that our ability to learn improves, gradually over time, but not by much. However, if we look at the amount of technological change, it is accelerating. And Eddie Obeng introduces this concept of midnight, which is the point at which that crosses over and we're in a world after midnight. So we've gone past the point where where our learning is able to accommodate all the technological change, and we have to be really innovative. And also, his whole thing is that we need to be okay with making mistakes. Now, I'd like to extend this concept to, knowledge, where our ability to consume and process has improved somewhat. I mean, there's definitely been some improvement, but the rate of knowledge growth is in that same sort of exponential, maybe even more hockey stick shaped than the line above. So we are again in this world after midnight where there's just too much knowledge and we have to be really selective about what we're doing. And hopefully that will make sense now when I introduce my principles that I'm trying to apply. So for me, number one thing is improving the signal to noise ratio of input. And that looks like reducing the number of things that I'm consuming. Less is definitely equal to more. Reading less books, reading less newsletters, watching less videos. It's like about having a really strong filter there. Another thing is not trying to capture everything I consume, because I feel like everything I consume, because it's now possible to capture a lot of your thoughts or whatever, but just because it is possible doesn't mean you have to do it. I have this tendency to want to grab everything, like making little notes on paper or whatever, and just letting those things go and just focusing on what is really important. Then, back to another point, which is balancing input and output. Like, I don't want to be just this voracious consumer of information, just like getting everything in. I feel like it's like the character from Spirited Away, which is, just trying to consume. No Face, that's his name. Another important thing for me has been settling on imperfection. I think, I've been looking to find the right way to do something, and, I think you have to bury it at some point and actually just start doing it, because otherwise you will never get anywhere and you'll just like be focusing on this perfect system, but you won't actually be using the system. And obviously nothing is set in stone. I'm just trying to figure this all out as I go along, just learning, and making these videos is really helping me structure my thinking and make sure that I can actually live these principles out. And then a focus on processing. So processing is the difference between information and knowledge. Like if you're just getting like little tidbits of information and never ever processing them, it never like crystallizes in your thought. You're not forming those new neural networks. And it's also the hard work of, cultivating this digital knowledge garden. Reading is easy. Writing and processing and that sort of activity really takes time. Just a note on that: if there's no structure, you won't do it. If you don't have the systems in place, you definitely won't process. One of the videos that I've seen speaks about this collector's fallacy, where you're just collecting information, but you're not actually doing anything with it. So talking about structure, I like to have different stacks to work with. So what do I mean by stacks? It means like different pieces of information in different parts of the process. And then that allows me to go to where I want to go. Whenever I feel I have the right energy to do something, I can just go to, the appropriate stack. And then really importantly is like leaving clues for my future self. Again, referencing Ali Abdaal, like my mind is a dumbass. That's why I call it one stuttering mind, just because it goes from there to there to there. And I think it's important for myself to have these clues that I can go back, or, the tag system to go back and find the information is super important for me. Okay, that's a lot of information. So let's get into how do I actually go about cultivating my garden. So I've developed this nice graphic which, extends the garden metaphor, and there are 4 phases of this. The first phase is capturing the information. So that's obviously just, before that it's actually consuming the information, but then capturing is entering it into my knowledge garden. And then there's the phase of idea generation. So that's, planting different seeds and, expanding the knowledge that I'm either capturing or just, generating my own thoughts. And then next is processing that. So, putting water on the seeds, and then output. And output is about publishing or, creating content or whatever it might be, adding value to the world. So processing, I'm going to look at in future videos, and I'll discuss that a little bit at the end. But output is future Dario's problems. I haven't really worked on that framework so much. For me, these videos are the output. But when I think about output, I'm thinking more about like publishing. And I know a lot of people use Logseq plus Obsidian to do like longer form writing. And that's something I'm going to look to in the future, but not right now. So getting into capturing, I want to look at, the 2 different places that I can capture information and how I capture all the different inputs. I've spoken in another video about how I decide on what I'm going to put in pages and what I'm just going to put in my journal. So you can have a look for that. I'll link to it. But the first thing that I'll put into pages are long articles. When I find long articles, I will typically just, bookmark them in Pocket, which is that little pink icon. And I can either read them in Pocket and highlight them there, or I can send them to my Kindle with this push to Kindle app, which I've also spoken about previously, and then I can read them in my Kindle, and the Kindle highlights I then bring in. And I bring in those highlights using a spreadsheet that I've also created a video on. So books are the other thing that go into my pages. I used to have a Readwise subscription, but I found that I wasn't using it that much from the spaced repetition part of it. Again, like if I'm using spaced repetition to like learn what others have said, it doesn't feel like a knowledge and like growing my own knowledge. It feels like regurgitation. But the one benefit of Readwise is that if you read hard copy books and you haven't taken notes in them, you are able to get others' Kindle highlights from those books. They're not always that extensive. So another way to go about that is to go to Goodreads and get the top quotes. So Goodreads is over here, and I'll just get the top quotes and I'll use that as a dump of information. And these are literally like the quotes from the books. There's no processing, no nothing, just direct passages. And then finally, like if I'm doing any courses, I did this really interesting course called Learning How to Learn on Coursera, for instance, and I just took all the notes in digital format, and that was just a text file, but I've brought them into a separate page in Logseq now. And then what do I put in the journal? The journal, I put all my little nibbles, and again, thanks to Ali for this language. But that's like podcasts and YouTube videos and tweets and like anything small. And that I just, I don't create a page for that. I just put them straight in the journal. Now, all of these, I use a single template to add the metadata for that. And I call this metadata, or this template, my crumbs template. It's literally just who's the creator, what is the link, some generic tags, and what is the type. So that's literally how I like process it now. And this has changed from a previous video where I had a template for one thing, a template for another thing. For me, it's really just come down to like, am I actually going to use it? Like, what is the simplest thing that I can use that will cover all these bases? Okay, so that's step one, which is capturing. Step two is idea generation. And again, there's two different ways of doing this for me. The one is personal thinking, where it's my own work, if I can call it that. So I have the one tag, which is fleeting, and that's just stream of consciousness, like random ideas. So this will be in the journal, or actually wherever, like it's in journals or pages or wherever it is. I'll just add the hashtag fleeting and I'll just write like an idea down. The next one is reflection, and that's where I'm thinking about certain scenarios or incidents. Like a lot of the times it's things that have happened at work, and I'm sort of, mulling it over and just like trying to squeeze out like what happened and the significance of the events, and also thinking about like what has happened within the team or what has happened in this situation. It's just everything that is like about a clear event, I guess. I'm reflecting upon that. And the last one of these is like a story, and that's just, personal accounts and memories. I've only recently started doing this because I noticed I was lacking this tag for just like random stories or like recalling past events that I feel like might be useful in the future to go back to. And then there's this other category of building on what others have said. And again, just to stress that this can happen in any place. Like it can happen in the journal, it can happen in one of the pages on those books, and I'll just add a hashtag with one of these titles and write a little bit on it. And the first hashtag there is a question. Did this trigger any further questions that I'd like to revisit? And then the second one is an observation. Was there anything that I could build on that? Were there any links? So this hopefully creates a framework that I can revisit later, although as I said, things may change, and I'm sure that these tags will evolve over time. So getting back into Logseq, I wanted to make a quick note on trade-offs of these different things. So because Logseq is and any of these network note-taking tools are unstructured, it means that there will always be trade-offs, and often you'll not be aware of these trade-offs until later down the line. And I'm sure I'm going to come across things and the system will change. And it's just something we have to bear in mind, that this flexibility will mean that we can change, but it's also not the end of the world. Like in another one of my videos, I showed how you can use VS Code to change things en masse throughout your database. And it's nice to know that you can make those changes quite easily at scale. So getting into mistakes I've made, and I've handled some of these before in other videos, but there's this, I think the number one thing which I have done, which really irked me, is this backlinking every word of interest, which is the wiki effect. Just seeing a word and being like, I'm gonna backlink that. And I think it's important to still use tags, like definitely use tags, but rather just add a tag at the end of the block, and then it's much easier to change that. And instead of focusing on the word, it makes you think about the context more. There's also this tendency to default to the folder approach and find new homes for content. And I've put there Nat example because something I saw Nat Eliasson do in one of his videos where he had quotes from a book, but then he moved the quotes to like a folder or to another page which was like more relevant. And I think a better way is to rather just leave it in the source and just tag the block or reference that block. And that's the beauty with like this, having the block as the core functional unit of these network note-taking apps, is that you can just, you know, reference that one block and not have to move things around. And you can find it, again, super easy with queries. Another thing is, you know, being lazy and not using tags. And I think it will come back to bite me, and that's okay. I'll get there. I think it's trying to, you know, it's trying to get into this mindset of using these tags. I've again spoken about trying to capture everything, but I find that I do that all the time, where I'm just trying to capture far too much and it's just becoming noisy. And then, yeah, again, continuing to ignore my own principles. I guess it just takes time to stick. So I guess I'm really hammering home the point here that it's an imperfect system and that it's growing with time, and hopefully there's just a couple of ideas that you can implement in your own database. I've actually tried to drink my own medicine and go through my database today and sort of rejig some things, and I realized that there's still a lot of tagging and work required, which just, you know, encourages me to, again, not read more or, you know, try and expand knowledge before just condensing or actually synthesizing what I already have. So getting into a quick demo of searching your database, I'm just going to open this page on the right here. So that was a shift click, and I'm going to search for failure. And if I go there and I just go to the page failure, you'll see here that I've got this filter. And I think I've touched this in previous videos, but if you just go here and you say, I want to look at failure that relates to identity. And it says, okay, cool. As a New York Times article pointed out, failure has been transformed from an action, I failed, to an identity, I am a failure. So that's a cool insight. What if I want to look at it without that identity? So I shift click it and I exclude it. And then these are all the passages with failure, but that don't have the tag identity. So that allows me to explore quite nicely and just go through very, very quickly. Queries are a little bit more directed. So I've quickly gone to my queries page. So I'm looking to make a targeted query about any observations that I've made, say now for strategies. So let me go there and I can say query, and then the syntax is and observations about strategy. So it's just and observations strategy. And then it will give me the observations that I've made about strategy on certain books. So How Will You Measure Your Life? Again, one of my favorite books on strategy and life and whatever. And there are all the observations that I've made about strategy. And I can go further than that. I can say observations about strategy, but not, and I add another bracket there, not about resources. And that, no, not resources, not nor resources. There we go. And you can see it's sort of much more targeted searching. You can do the same thing with filters, you can do it with queries, but yeah, it's just this tagging system will give you a really powerful way to resurface information later down the line. So further resources, as I said, you know, I don't necessarily like the language of building a second brain or whatever, but it's ubiquitous, it's out there, and there's some really good resources that you can have a look at. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about what I'm planning to do next. I really appreciate everyone's support, the comments, the subscribers. It was completely unexpected, and yeah, I hope I can continue to produce some good content. With that said, I've been working on some cool Zettelkasten materials. I've called it opening Pandora's slipbox because there's just so much out there. And I'm getting to an approach there which combines a whole bunch of things that I've found across the internet and which will hopefully work for a whole bunch of people. So thank you so much for the support. I'll hopefully see you next week, holding thumbs, with the first installment of the Zettelkasten video.